Good morning, and what a wonderful way to launch NDTV's Decoding G20 Conclave with the man who's been working silently behind the scenes and very much at the forefront of pushing various, besides G20, but also trade agreements, is the Honorable Minister for Commerce, Piyush Goyal, who's just come back from Jaipur after a very successful trade ministers meet. Thank you so much for joining us today on the conclave, Mr. Goyal. But of course, first, what a wonderful week it's been for India. And I think Chandrayaan-3 and India being on the moon and the fact that the world's most powerful leaders are going to be in India next week has really all come together to showcase where India is in the world today.
Thank you, Sonia, and a very good morning to all the viewers of NDTV. It's indeed a matter of great pride that our scientists have finally taken us to the moon and taken us in grand style. We are the first country in the world to ever land on the solar south surface, on the moon's south surface. And in a manner of speaking, that's reflective of the new India, the emerging confident India that we are seeing on the world stage. As you rightly pointed out, this has been a week of many celebrations. The Prime Minister, in fact, landed directly at Bengaluru from Greece to compliment and be with all the scientists. And I think when you look at the G20 in the context of India's emerging strength on the global stage, the Chandrayaan-3 landing was a very appropriate beginning to the next fortnight of engagements, celebrities, and India's own presence at the world stage. We just had the G20 Trade and Investment Ministers meeting in Jaipur, and it started just the day after the landing. And I promise you, the entire world's leaders from the trade and industry side were completely in awe of the India story. They're looking at India as leading global growth. They're looking at India to provide leadership to the world economy. They're looking at India bringing sanity to the progress of mankind. They're looking at India to bring inclusivity as we proceed towards greater good of mankind. And therefore, the India G20 presidency and its theme of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family, very appropriately fits into the broken world's desire to get back into harmony. The one earth, one family, one future is going to be the defining theme that the world is going to converge on. And I have no doubt in my mind that Prime Minister Modi will provide leadership to the global effort to bring peace and harmony to the world.
It's interesting because, Mr. Goyal, if we just look back at this 1 year, when it first came that India was getting the G20 presidency, there were those who said, well, you know, this happens and it's a routine thing. But India in this 1 year has really redefined what the G20 presidency means. We've just heard Ms. Amitabh Kant say, in a sense, the G20 under India's presidency is now more powerful than the UN Security Council. Is this a sign of India not accepting the current global way that multilateral organizations are run, that there has to be reform and India has to be the center stage of that reform when we look at global organizations?
Well, very clearly, Prime Minister Modi, ever since 2014-15, when India played a very important role at the Paris summit, at COP21, and helped bring the world together to agree on the Paris declarations, has over the last several years taken a leadership role bringing together the global south, the less developed countries, the developing and emerging economies, and provided voice to their aspirations and their future. We saw that on several forums. We saw that at the WTO MC12 held in Geneva last year, where an almost collapsed WTO ministerial was retrieved thanks to the guidance given by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the leadership that we were able to demonstrate, and all of this centers around trust. What Prime Minister Modi has done is earned the trust for India from the rest of the world. And that trust is certainly the defining factor of our G20 presidency. As was just mentioned, the G20 grouping represents nearly 85% of the world's GDP. In fact, only yesterday at the B20 summit, which is also very, very widely represented by 55 countries who have participated in our B20, probably the largest business engagement that India has seen in so many years. We had 15 trade ministers on one stage, representing, I think, nearly 80 to 85 trillion dollars of global economy. And that is the power, that is the strength that India has offered to the world. The fact that we can bring diverse opinions on one stage, we can collectively agree on almost every issue related to trade and industry, amongst other things. And the fact that despite all the challenges that the world is facing, India has been able to, save and accept the geopolitical issue, bring convergence in all our tracks, convergence on issues, bring a new dimension to the future, and offer to the world a stage, a platform, which will help redefine the boundaries of world growth, redefine the potential of international trade. And in that sense, the leadership role that India has achieved is true testimony to the sheer grit and potential of 140 crore Indians.
No, because it has been an extremely tough negotiation as well. We see all the events, but we're not looking at all the backroom hard negotiations happening. Even the trade ministers meet, the successful one you talked about, didn't have a communique because of disagreement on a paragraph on Ukraine. We've heard what the US ambassador has said about Ukraine. Do you expect that in the communique for the G20 Heads of State Summit that this is going to be an insurmountable problem?
Well, nothing in life is insurmountable. I think we are all optimists. And today, this young India with such a exceptionally attractive young demographic profile, under 30, which over the next 30 years is going to continue to remain under 30 and possibly add to global economy as a contribution from India, $30 trillion. We are looking at growing from $3.5 trillion to $35 trillion in the next 25 years. I think this resurgent India today offers a beacon of hope that nothing is impossible. We are going to persevere, and we are still very confident that we'll be able to bring convergence. You must note that almost all the tracks came out with an outcome document and chair's text. It was not just a chair's text. There were significant outcomes, including in our meeting yesterday, where we came up with a Jaipur call for action, which will support the MSMEs in a big way in India. We came out with significant agreement amongst all countries, all member and invitee countries, that we will look at digitization in this interconnected world so that global trade can be paperless. And we were also able to look at convergence on mapping global value chains to make them more resilient. Now, such significant tasks for the future reflect very well on our ability to steer different viewpoints, different thoughts on the table. And while, of course, there is the geopolitical issue on which convergence at our ministerial level was not possible, I'm sure given Mr. Modi's astute leadership and his popularity, the command that he has amongst world leaders, the friendships that he has forged with world leaders, we will see some good outcomes coming out of the Leaders Summit early next month. I'm very confident it's going to be a one-in-a-kind G20 summit, just as over the year, not in 40 cities, but actually over 55 cities, representing every state in the country, every union territory of the country. We had close to 200 meetings between the working groups and the ministerials and engagement groups. We had over 100,000 people coming from all over the world to visit India. I would think today every single Indian, be it somebody in the remotest villages of India, recognizes and respects India's pole position in the global order. And therefore, I think it's a matter of great pride that we have taken the G20 to the next level. Very often, programs bring luster to the country. I think India has been able to add luster to the G20 itself.
And in fact, even just coming back to when the Ukraine invasion began, India took a very strong stand on its view that it refused to go with the Western way, it refused to be pinned into a hole on what its statements or what its stance should be. We've seen over the last 1 year, there's been a change in the US especially and the West on how they first wanted almost condemnatory in their statements against India's stand to now a sense of more acceptance to recognition that it's the India way, as the foreign minister has been saying. Do you think that's been the big change? We've seen the expansion of BRICS as well just last week. Also the fact that President Xi will be here in India as well as of now. President Putin not coming, but how do you think that 1 year has played out geopolitically? Because that really is where India is creating an India way.
Well, India always stands for peace and harmony, and not today, for centuries and I think millenniums. India has been a country which has been a beacon of hope and enlightenment for people across the world. And India has consistently taken the stand that this is not an era of war. Prime Minister Modi, in fact, gave leadership at Bali during the Indonesian presidency and helped the world converge that dialogue and diplomacy will be the way forward. And I think that's truly been India's strength, the fact that he's one sane voice amongst a lot of different viewpoints, who's able to bring convergence in the world thinking that we have to have peace in the world for progress. Our bigger challenges are poverty. Our bigger challenges are meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. Our bigger challenges are to address the needs of a young world, which is not desirous of problems, but is desirous of all the good things of life for their families and for the future.
Of course, but as the G20 talks about greater economic ties across borders globally, we've seen that countries across the world, whether it's the US and now India, imposing protectionist curbs on, say, laptop imports, etc. Also, that you've seen global food prices rising at a record high. What is the impact on India, and what is behind the government's logic of imposing protectionist duties, whether it's on laptop curbs and export duties on onions?
I think it's a matter of perspective, whether it's protectionist duties or they are fair and equitable trade practices. There's also the security element, and clearly the laptop restrictions emerge out of security concerns. Each one of your viewers uses laptops all the time. I see programs on NDTV on technology and articulating the intricacies and all the good that technology can bring in, also at times warning people about the pitfalls of technology. And I think our curbs, as many other countries around the world have brought in, have been more security related. India certainly is not a protectionist country, but India respects that there have to be transparent rules of trade. And wherever we find that countries are not giving a level playing field to Indian businesses, wherever we find that Indian businesses are discriminated due to maybe undeclared or undisclosed subsidies or non-tariff barriers, the India of today is not a weak India. The India of today retaliates. The India of today takes action. The India of today stands with our MSMEs, with our domestic manufacturing or other capabilities. And therefore, when you view this in the lens of reciprocity, you will find that India actually is probably the most transparent in its trading practices, the most fair in its openness, yet an opportunity for growth, finally for India, because today we don't allow anybody to take Indian industry on the wrong end of the stick. We are making sure that Indian business, Indian industry gets a level playing field.
Right, and as we are the B20, India's future is really going to shape the world's future. Thank you so much, Mr. Piyush Goyal, Honorable Minister, for decoding the Modi government's vision of G20. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia. Bye-bye.